So the key to playing the Scottish well is to develop a thick Scottish accent and drink lots and lots of beer. So that way when we bring the king, like we start to tip over, we start to run like this. And we have been oppressed by so many times by these English, like they're playing 1c4, not letting us get the usual attacking play. This is absolutely unacceptable. We've got to revolt. The peasants are revolting! The peasants are revolting! Illingworth Chess, the best to improve your chess. Hey everyone, it's GM Max here, and this video is all about learning the Scotch. Not the drinking Scotch, but I mean the Scotch game. So that means that for this we have the moves from the game between David Howell against Peter Svidler from the Bunratty Online Chess Complex 2021. Funny coincidence because Bunratty, they have this tournament, they have like a big setting, like you have the pub, where everyone goes for a drink, have some beers between the rounds, nice fun social event. Not ever been there because I'm just I never go out drinking, I just stay at home recording lots of YouTube videos and, enjoying a good life. But anyway, after knight to f3, knight c6, we have the Scotch d4. What's so good about the Scotch? What's good about the Scotch is that after they take us, we are the only one with a pawn in the center. Just us, folks. We got the center. What do you got? Nothing. So yeah, that's the way the line sort of fork a bit. Now, you may know that I covered a video a while back. It's probably up in the suggest or I'll put it in the description, where I showed black winning with the move bishop to c5. But I also pointed out in that video that you can play the move knight to b3, meet bishop to b6 with knight c3, and the bishop might look like a good sniper, but we got a few tricks up our sleeve as well, guys. If they go knight f6, we just go queen e2. And you can often either put that bishop on e3, like if they go d6 after bishop e3 and long castle, I think that white already is the one who has got a little bit of an advantage. If they castle short, you just go f3, g4, g5 and pawn storm the king. Or if they castle long, you can go g3 and kind of get some good pressure with the bishop on the long diagonal instead. So you got a little bit of nice flexibility to work with there. Or if they put the knight on e7 instead, I find it in general a move like queen to e2. It's still pretty decent, if they castle. You can play bishop e3 and you can try to do funny stuff like f5. But you can castle, you can trade the pawns, and well, the fact that black king is a bit more exposed than the white king in a position like this does suggest. Then white does still have a little bit of a nibble. You can still feast at the dinner table here. But okay, there are other moves as well black can play. Maybe you'll see a lot of the beginner levels, knight d4, but you're very happy to see knight d4 because it just gives you a nice lead in development where they don't really have a good way to attack the queen. c5 doesn't really count, so it just weakens the d5 and d6 squares quite fatally. So knight d4, not so serious. One move that can be a bit tricky is the move queen h4, where they can try to grab a pawn and just laugh at you. But the reality is it's actually very good for white if black takes the pawn. So we should go knight c3, bishop b4, and they can take if they want, let them have it. But after queen e4, we go knight db5, and then we just smash it and let them have it. But then in this case, it's very hard for black to find a good way to defend this pawn. Queen e5 is getting hit by the move f4, just deflecting that queen away from the defense of the pawn. If you play queen g2 instead, white's got a little x-ray defense, bishop f3, and then when the queen moves out of the way, you're going to just fork the king and the rook. So what that means is black is basically compelled to put the king on d8 and keep the king stuck in the center. So bishop c3, c3, king d8. I still remember that there was this book, I think, by Lev Gutman, where he did this whole yearbook survey or this whole book on the queen h4 Scotch. And he was saying, the computers are completely wrong. This design is completely equal. Why it's absolutely nothing. All of the sources on this line give complete rubbish evaluations. I'm a grandmaster. Sign up for my grandmaster chess secrets. But the reality is that this is just complete rubbish for black. I mean, look at that king. We're laughing at this king. I mean, this is not a role fit for a king to defend a pawn. I mean, when was the last time a king was babysitting the peasants? The peasants dragging him along as such, with the, with the hoe that he's holding, or the pitchfork that he's got. In any case, the white would play bishop g5. The rook would come to e1. And you just, play bishop f3, queen d2. You just pile everything on. And I mean, black is just not able to get the pieces out. You're playing without the king. You're playing without the rooks. You're playing without your dignity. What chance have you got now? So instead of all of this fancy queen h4, try to grab a pawn, Svidler played what I consider to be the best move in this position. He played the move knight f6, hitting the pawn. And now I've already mentioned many times before, those of you who've watched a lot of my videos will know, I've said knight c3, bishop b4 is totally equal. Nothing special for white there. So the critical line is to take e on c6, and after b takes c6, then to play the move e5. If you want something a little bit lazy, you can go bishop d3 castle and just close your eyes and hope that you don't fall asleep from total boredom. But I prefer to, play the red meat system, e5, get that attack on the knight. Because, if they move the knight without thinking, we can keep attacking with moves like c4. With moves like bishop d3, castle is just very comfortable position for white with the extra space. Black really needs to disrupt white's up before white can, get his house in order, complete his development, show those pocket aces. So instead we had queen e7, queen to e2. So he's playing queen e7 because obviously there was a little pin on the pawn beforehand. Knight d5, and here is where we have a little bit of a surprise up our sleeve, a little Grandmaster secret. Because in the old days, back when Kasparov revitalized the Scotch, and when he was showing his extremely deep preparation, he was playing it with the move c4. But the thing with c4 is black can go bishop a6, and, well, let's now accelerate, give the short version of the theory. If you go b3, trying to defend the pawn, trying to sneak in a bishop a3, black can go g6, sort of starting to hit, like, it's kind of almost a formulaic system. And after, say, bishop b2, bishop g7, g3, you get this long forcing line. I mean, you can, put the video at half speed if you want to think about it a bit more. But the main point is that black is able to basically destroy the white center. And if black can get rid of that center, he's usually doing all right. So say after bishop e5, we have this weird kind of material distribution, take, cd, bishop takes f1. And, you get this ending where black has got 2 pawns and a rook for a knight and a bishop. And it's true, they are double pawns, and white does have pretty decent coordination. You can try to blockade the pawns and have some potential that way. But ultimately, it's just an equal endgame that more has been worked out to a draw. I mean, both sides can try to outplay one another, but realistically, it's not that much happening in these positions. So that's why some players start to shift some other things. For example, I know that the chess mood guys say, well, I recommend the move h4 is kind of the modern trend. Though nowadays the computer sort of shown if you go like queen e6 that black is doing fine, like knight d2, a5, you're still getting your bishop a6, moves like g3, knight b4 are also kind of annoying, just going after the pawn. So black does get absolutely full counterplay here as well. It's not like there's really a miracle weapon against this line for black, if I'm being honest. Black does objectively have a fine position. But I have a little bit of a surprise weapon. Well, I remember I showed to a student like many years ago, back in 2016. I still remember this student actually. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to embarrass him. But like what he would do is like he would like crack all these jokes like all the time, like make some witty quips about the position. And he also made sure, like he said, it's very important that after our lesson that we have some time for me to put my food in the microwave, to eat that food, enjoy that food, and then to talk about random tangents that we come up with on top of our head. Pretty smart guy, pretty cool guy as well. So yeah, a lot of good times, but ultimately I realized that, why help one person when I can help a million of you on YouTube, right? So white played the move knight d2, and the greatest strength of knight d2 is that the computer doesn't mention its top lines, but it's actually just as good a move as the other ones. So it's where the opponents, if they just like, engine spamming like spacebar, 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 well, unfortunately, they're not going to get the bullets firing in that way. Now, if knight d2, black thought, oh, I can just play g6 anyway. It works against all the other lines, so it's going to work here as well. But it kind of gives white a little bit of what he wants to some extent. I mean, another option for black if he wants to be really creative is to go rook b8. You're just saying, hey, I'm going to make it hard for you to move that bishop. And then I guess, you could play h4, and I have no idea what's going on anymore. Apparently the computer is saying that, it also it's protesting against a complete flagrant violation of opening principles. And it's saying you should go queen here, queen back, and just go for a repetition, knight d5, and yeah, you can play a grandmaster draw. Rajabov is cheering in his chair at the moment. Let's see what happened in the game where we had the move g6. This is the move that Giri would play going all out for the win. White now doesn't play the move knight f3, but he plays the move c4 instead, kicking that knight so that if black were to play, well, he should probably play the move bishop knight to f4 actually. Try to annoy that queen a bit. But it's an interesting position. I mean, you can go b3. You can still do your double fianchetto fun stuff. Get the kick, castle on either flank. I mean, it's a position with chance for both sides. If black does go f6 and trade off that pawn, I do believe he equalizes. But it's a game. The better player will win. It's not like you can force an advantage out of opening with white anyway. Even though I would like to say it in my courses, I'm going to stay honest. And rather than saying, oh, just play like the Stafford Gambit and win. Anyway, instead we had to move bishop a6. And white played a move knight to f3, just keeping this pawn defended, but also if black does play some, let's say, normal move like bishop g7, then you can kind of hit him with bishop g5 and get that tempo on the queen. I mean, admittedly, the endgame after f6, like, this is just to show you a typical endgame that you can get from these Scotch lines. Very often you're going to see, like, a trade like d6, ed6, or a trade like f6, ef6. And these sort of endings are ones I think that, objectively speaking, I think that this ending is basically just equal. If black just castles is not a whole lot where, that white can do to pressure. At the same time, it's kind of an interesting structure. You can see that black's got the double pawns. His bishop is a little bit passive on a6 at the moment. So it's definitely a lot of scope to try and outplay the opponent. Like, it's a very interesting structure. And I think there's a room where people who like to get those creative juices flowing, definitely it's a system that allows you to do that. So anyway, bishop d7 is still a decent move for black, but a move queen b4 is, I think, the critical one. And it's where we start to have a lot of fun, where the Indians even have no idea what's going on. And as I said before, the only good move for white really is to go king d1. Why king d1? Well, the idea is not just to, look like a drunkard, as I mentioned in the introduction, but there is actually an idea behind this. So let's say if black plays a move like bishop to g7, just develops normally, saying, yeah, I got you, knight, I got my pin here. But then we can play the move queen to d2. And this move wouldn't have really worked so well with the, if the bishop was still on f8, because that knight would just move and there wouldn't really be that too much happening. But obviously knight b6 is not possible now, and black would first need to trade the queens. And we kind of get that time we lost back, where we're able to take back. And if knight b6, we go b3, and, white's actually doing quite okay here, despite the move d6 here. You might think, oh, black is just winning the pawn and he's just doing great. But it's not that simple. If black does play d takes e5, we actually have a little tactic here. Can you guys spot it with white to move? So guys, do make sure to smash that like button if you're enjoying this video so far. It tells me to make more videos like this one for you. It also boosts the YouTube algorithm, so I win and you win at the same time. It's not like chess, where we only get 1 point. In this case, we both get the full point. So well done if you can with the move knight takes c5. A pretty standard tactic when the king is on e8, because if they take with the knight, the bishop with the knight, we go rook e1, and you can kind of see that with f6 and f4, that white is getting the material back. Black can try to go knight d7 and still say that he's a pawn up, but then I find that the move g3 is quite unpleasant for black, because even though in this position black is a pawn up, I think that with the black bishop being very out of play in the double pawns, I actually rate the bishop pair higher here. I think after bishop h3 and rook f1 and just pile the pressure on the pawn, I do think that white is simply better at this point. After rook d6, you got bishop b4, and black isn't even really able to keep that extra pawn for a long time. So it's a very good example of how white's initiative kind of plays out in these sort of positions. That might explain why black played move rook b8, but I think that the best move might actually be to go knight to e7, anticipate that queen to d2 move. You can still play moves like h4 and still try to hack like AlphaZero, but it's a very complex position, and even moves like d5 will ultimately give black sufficient counterplay, but of course very messy, and anything could happen at this point. It's one of those situations where the engines will tell you one thing, but because it's so complex and very hard for humans to play, that definitely has a lot of scope to outsmart the opponent. It's like the better player will win, But okay, Svidler played rook b8, and I think that rook b8, well, it's definitely a reasonable move. But now white can play queen c2, and it's sort of like the idea that if they don't give you an easy queen d2, you can still go queen c2 and force that knight back with knight e7. And yeah, now Howell's move was a very interesting one. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but it's kind of a creative idea. To me, if I was playing as well, I'd probably just play like bishop d3, c3, just develop the pieces normally. But it doesn't put a lot of pressure on black, after c5. Black can, go bishop b7 and try to, arrange the pieces to pile the pressure on e5, which is a strength, but is also a bit of a target at the same time. So Howell comes up with a move queen b3, and it's not actually a pawn sack, because if black were to take, well, it turns out that you've got the discard attack on the bishop, which is pretty unpleasant, given that the a7 pawn is the next kid to be knocked off the block. So instead, Svidler played c5, a good move here. And after queen takes b4, which way would you take back on b4 in this position? So do make sure to pause the video while I get a nice Thai massage in between your thinking. Oh, wow. Releasing that tension felt so good. So relaxing. Maybe that's why Howell played queen takes b4, because you want to release the tension with the queens. But yeah, here I think that you should definitely play rook takes b4. I mean, A, you're keeping that rook open. B, you're still keeping a good grip over the center. Like, you can go rook b6, bishop b7, and kind of swing all the pieces over to gang up on the pawn. And I like black's chances here. I think that queen b4 wasn't the best move, and I probably would have played like bishop d3, just like waited for him to go bishop g7, and maybe then take a little bit later, because it's not like black is threatening to take on b3, so why rush the issue? But instead, Svidler decides to undouble the pawns with c takes b4, not realizing the double pawns are actually the underdog advantage. In Australia, we love our underdogs. We say, chin up, mate, go get them. And then after that, we end up just, getting the advantage, because with the struggle comes the message. In any case, up c d4, we had to move bishop to d3. Black played bishop to b7. I mean, I would have gone bishop g7. Like, why not, get the bishop into play? Why not get the rooks into play as well? Chess is a team sport. We got to all work together. Not just all, like, fend for ourselves. Like, oh, no, I'm a bishop. Like, that's like another church. Like, you can go do your own thing. I'm not going to donate to your cause. But okay, we had bishop to b7. White played rook to e1, saying, yeah, I don't care if you take on f3. Because, yeah, you damage my pawns, but I get the bishop pair and, f4, bishop e3, all that good stuff. Just develop and keep control. We had bishop to g7, and white side was then like, oh, YOLO swag, let's trade off that bishop e4. What a great move by Howell. And what's great about it is if you don't play this move, you're going to run something like bishop f3, knight c6, and you're going to start feeling the pressure a little bit, feeling the squeeze. But now with bishop e4, white's saying, well, now all I have left is the space advantage. Black's got nothing. I'm just going to keep it defended. King c2, bishop f4, just to keep up that harmony of the position. If I remind you, like a time like in 2006, when I was, there was like this Harmony Day project, and, I guess I was picked as like into Asian women at the time, which I still am, of course. I have a Vietnamese wife after all. But anyway, these jokes aside, it was a very fun experience, like learning about all the like multiculturalism. Like I remember having like the picture of the, of the Australian team at that World Youth Trials for Olympia, like all the different cultures. It was really, really cool and really awesome. Anyway, I guess that's also the case here where, white realized like it's best when we all work together. The teamwork makes the dream work. We had knight to c6, king to c2, castles, bishop to f4. Just making sure, like, playing good, healthy moves. Like, it's like with the Scotch, like, the Scotch should play is relatively direct, so you don't need to worry trying to out these, like, deep Karpovian positional nuances or, Kramnik figure out all the details of the Berlin Wall. With the Scotch, it's very blunt and simple. Develop the pieces, play weird moves that the computer somehow says is good, and then win the endgame, where you've got that lovely space advantage, and black is just sitting there passive. Now, black could consider a move like f6, and I think that the reason he didn't play f6 is he probably thought, oh, I'm just blundering a pawn with rook f6 and bishop c7. But it actually wouldn't, I think, be in white's best interest to take that pawn. Because then after rook c8, there are a few little tricks that black's got up his sleeve. Like, if you go bishop g3, black can go knight a5, and suddenly it's not so easy to defend that pawn anymore. D5 is already coming with this threat. But also, if you do play a move like b3, you're falling for cheapos, like rook takes f3, and in the air, that bishop on a long diagonal suddenly had its say. After bishop f4, black tried to abstain with the move rook f to e8. And now I think that if white plays rook to e3, just keeps the rook protected, well, it kind of takes that sting out of f6 or out of d6. Because now after rook d1, like this is what Howell played, and this was just a tactical mistake. Because actually even rook a1 would be better than rook d1, keeping the rook defended that way. Because now after d6, black's able to get rid of that pawn on d7 that was kind of fixed as a good target earlier. But now black's not able to liquidate it, and white sort of had to, well, swallow his pride, admit his mistake, and play to move rook d to e1. I can so imagine Howell probably like fuming, like being under time pressure, like, oh man, this Peter Svidler guy, he just got lucky that he got this d6 in. But it turns out now the luck switched to Howell, because now black could have played this move g5. I mean, why not play such a creative move when you've got the chance? So that if you take either way, they can take back, and they get the Alekhine style snare with f5, and boom, we're rolling, boys. Well, I guess you can go g4 and stop it, but still black's doing okay in this position. But white could go bishop g3, but I mean, then black's got a few tricks as well. You could play b3 even and kind of like sacks a bit of material, get in some knight b4, even some d5. And it's not that easy for white to keep control. I mean, if you put that king on the d file, there's going to be some nasty checks on d8 potentially. But if king b1, they can kind of go d5, and it's some weird engine line that is way beyond my limited understanding. But the point is that after this, you can kind of go like either knight d3, or you can even do other funny stuff like f5, rook f4, e3, trying to keep that bishop as well defended as possible. And it does look like black's getting enough compensation here after knight e5 and rook d8. We're able to get that rook down to d2, and, it's not that easy for white to actually stop it. Because if you go knight f3, black can take and realize that rook e3 owns no rook d1 back rank mate. But after e6, it's only these positions where, black, he's down a pawn, but the extra pawn is kind of so weak that it doesn't really count for all that much. In fact, I think that if black even just plays some move like, let's say, f4, and just tries to force more pawns off the board, go rook d3 or whatever, it does seem like black should be able to draw this without too much of a struggle. So, okay, this is a very deep engine line, and of course, like, no one's ever going to play this in a blitz game. And I can imagine someone who's like, oh, I don't want to listen to computer, I want to listen to GM Max, like, where are the jokes, man? We're just, like, starting to finish laughing at joke, and then we have this long engine line where nothing's going on. But anyway, instead we had to move d takes e5. Now you can see the human side of things. It's also important to have that human touch. And, when you're a doctor, including a chest, it's good to have that bedside manner say, oh, yeah, I feel for you. Yeah, it must feel really bad having that horrible stomachache after blundering a piece. Yeah, not so nice. In any case, we had to move knight takes e5. Pawn to b3 was played, and if you don't play b3, you're kind of in trouble. If black were just trying to swap everything off like a swapperoo here. Well, the rook ending is not going to be salvageable for black. You can also see here, white's got moves like rook e7, and even moves like rook c5 or rook b5 as well. You can just try to transition into a winning pawn ending, or just pile up on the weaknesses. This is not what you want to do as black. No, b3, Svidler showed his tactical vision. Good work, Peter. We had a b3, knight b4. And I know you say that Grunfeld likes the best opening against d4, but we can forgive you for that. So now rook b d8. He's showing his ideas. He wants to get that rook down that d file, create some counterplay. Howell played the move f3, just wanting to make sure his rook is well protected. It's a sensible move, I think. Black played f5, kicking the rook. We had rook 4 to e2. Another good move by Peter Svidler, Russia's leading expert on cricket. He played the move rook to d4, hitting this bishop over here. Now, white, if he wanted to, he could be sneaky. He could tuck that bishop away on c1. The idea being that if black does take airing on e5, well, then the idea is that then after rook d1, that at least it's not a check. That being said, the move knight d3 is still can be a pretty annoying later on. So I can understand why white side not to go for this line, even though technically rook e7 and you gobble up pawns and you're still fine. But yeah, the game saw g3 instead, and Peter Svidler, you could have had the advantage. I was rooting for you, you're the nicest guy in chess I know, and you somehow managed to lose. Well, maybe I guess that's why you're the nicest guy, because you were too nice to the opponent. Anyway, black could have played the move to do a little drum roll. Dun 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 dun. Snap, c5. That's the move to play. What's the idea of c5? The idea is that we're basically fixing that b4 outpost, the d4 outpost. We're fixing these little weak pawns, like the backward b3 pawn in place. And what's white going to do? What's a useful move for white here? If he does try that bishop c1 that I mentioned before, black can cash in with rook e5. Just do a little swappy here. And now after rook to d1, we see the whole point of playing c5. It's too late for white to go pawn grabbing with rook takes c5, because we got the tricks, and I ain't afraid to show them. We go rook takes c1, go put the knight on d3, big fork there, and then with the extra piece, the ending is a win. Even though the knights are terrible at dealing with the passed pawns, a piece is still a piece, folks. So the game saw, instead of c5, great move if Svidler had played this, instead he started to shoot himself in the foot with g5. Again, just being too nice to your opponents, Peter. You've got to have a little bit more fighting spirit. Play it like it's a Hearthstone game. No prisoners. But yeah, we had to move bishop to c1. Obviously, bishop g5 is not what you really want to do, because rook e5, and, we got some tactics again. Rook d1, and, kind of similar to what we saw before of the rook on c5, like rook c1, and knight d3 is just like GG. So instead he played bishop c1, making sure to, since his rook d1's been kind of rearing its ugly head over and over and over again, kind of like a different strain to the COVID virus, well, therefore we tried to deal with it. And it turned out that Howell did actually have the vaccine here. So he could play the move g4, get those pawns on those light squares out of the range of the bishop. Instead, Svidler played h6. And now I think that the move f4 that Howell played was a really good move in this position. Because white is a pawn up, so he's able to consolidate, he's able to deal with the tricks like taking on e5 and putting your rook on d1. I think that white is just better here. And the game kind of bore that conclusion out. So I think the move that black probably should play if he wants to try and save the draw. I think that his best chance is to get rid of that annoying knight, because that is a very strong outpost for the knight on e5, just gumming up the rooks. And if f5, well, you go knight d3, and you can try to get the pawn back. Now, granted, white's probably still better. You can play moves like rook d1, and they still can't take because you've got rook takes d4, or you can play rook f1 and you can hit this pawn back. So white's still better, but it's definitely not as big an advantage as before. And if black finds a very beautiful rook e4 kind of defending by attacking, which is my favorite way of defending, you can meet rook e4 of f4, you can start to round up the little guy on e5, and I think that black should be able to save this position. The bishop's not that much better than the knight that black's not going to hold. So, in any case, instead of doing this, maybe Svidler was low on time. So very often, he will when he's doing like live streams, he'll go and think for a minute, like to say how horrible his position is and just play the best move in the position when he could have just played the best move immediately. But I guess you've got to show on, you've got to try and please the crowd. That's a bit of a handicap to have to deal with, and it proved to be too much for Svidler in this game because he played a move G4, and G4 just a decisive mistake. Now, like with the fixed structure, that's good for the white knight. The bishop's ready to come in this way. After the move knight to D3, white swapped, and unfortunately for Svidler, Howell is just a full pawn up. King C2, attack and defend at the same time. Good multitasking move. Rook F3 was played. White played a move B4. I guess saying, yeah, you're going to flag anyway, Peter. I mean, if I was white, I would go for something a little more aggressive. I go Rook E8. Give a little check. If King F7, we go Rook C8. And I mean, how are you going to defend C7? How are you going to defend A7? How are you going to not lose on time? I think white just wins this. And before, yeah, giving like a tiny glimmer of hope, but not really much. You know, Howell, he knows his Soviet classics. He is using that b5 pawn to fix both the black pawns in place. Also, because we have the dark squared bishop, it's much easier for white to get that bishop active and to attack that pawn in a menagerie of different ways. So we had to move bishop to d4. We had to move bishop a5, so he's trying to defend this way. White played b4, which is not the best move, like probably they're very low on time. White just go bishop c3 and say his bishop is better than black's. You got is like b4 and c5 to trap in the black bishop. You got moves like rook e5 to start attacking the weaknesses. It's going to take time, but eventually you're going to win this as white. But after b4, bishop d4, we had a crazy plot twist here. Actually, at this point, maybe h5 and h4 might be a better try, but I can still understand why he didn't want to allow c5. But it sort of came anyway, and yeah, Svidler played a move rook b3, which I think is a pretty obvious mouse slip for the move rook takes c3. But it's one thing that's changed with COVID and all these online chess tournaments, like, you know how all these top grandmas, like every time, like you make a mouse slip. It's like if you don't make a mouse slip, you get accused of cheating using like some, I don't know, some special Korean mouse pad or something like this. But okay, these jokes aside, yeah, rook e3 was the last move of the game. Black resigned before white could take the rook. And yeah, that's how you learn the Scotch. You learn it by realizing that you get that extra central space, that, you know, you can start to go for some attacks, like sometimes you castle long, sometimes you just trade off the queens and win the endgame, as Howell did here. But all in all, it's a fun line. If you like very direct play, if you like the hand-to-hand combat, if you prefer that to being the archer firing from afar, well, that's the system for you. Get your swords out, get ready to fight, and do make sure to smash that like button. Obviously, you enjoyed this video, otherwise you wouldn't have watched it all the way to the end, right? Well, thanks for staying put. Also, make sure to comment with what you loved about the video, and hit that subscribe button. I've got a little subscribe icon on the bottom right of the screen, you know, just over there, where, you know, you can press on it, or actually over there. Okay. We got it in the end. So that's the button to press. Like, hit the subscribe. And my ding, that notification bell. That's going to get my Grandmaster Chesses every day in your feed. So make sure to do that for the big brain play. So good luck playing the Scotch in your own games. You don't have to fear e4, e5 anymore. You've got the Grandmaster secret weapon. So I'll see you guys in the next video.